there's no way that Miranda Richardson's hair is that colorizer in 1799.
Or that dress,
Although she was using witchcraft, so who knows? Maybe.
Oh, you know what? That actually is a good point, though. I'm going to use my witchcraft to look cunty.
Welcome to 1999 the podcast. I am John Brooks, and with me today is not Jen Tisdale. Jen is going to be back next episode. Do not worry, she is not gone for long, but she had an emergency come up at the last minute. She's fine, everything's fine, and she will tell you about it or not at a future date. But she's fine, and she'll be back very, very soon. But with me today, filling in the co-host seat, very graciously, is returning champion. You will know her from our Mystery Men episode, Becky Ellis. Becky, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm a little frazzled. It's been a
yeah. I'm lying. I am also frazzled right now.
It has been so we're doing this spooky movie horror round of movies, and we've had a whole bunch of cursed episodes, which I think is appropriate but also kind of annoying. So I've had a bunch of guests that have to reschedule and cancel, and people getting sick and all kinds of stuff happening. So I'm looking forward to this being over, but we've enjoyed doing it so far. Anyway, what's new with you? Anything interesting happening in your world?
I'm just doing my freelance work. Actually, I do have a thing. This is not official, but I may be starting a YouTube channel collaborating with another. I don't know if I should say his name, but another creator that I am friends with.
Okay.
So you will know on Twitter. I will let everyone know when it happens. But we're planning on doing pop culture satirical things and re-edited trailers and just silly shit like that.
Sounds good. So you're pivoting to video, as they say.
Well, that's always what I
know. There's this whole joke around podcasters of pivoting to video.
Okay. So, I'm not in that podcast ecosystem really. Right. So I was
there's no pivot for you. Anyway, we are going to be continuing on our horror round, and we have got a big one today, and a interesting movie about which I have a lot to say, and I'm sure you do too. Released on November the 19th. Today's movie is the 21st highest grossing movie of the year, but the 20th highest grossing movie released in the year, 1999, only because Shakespeare in Love, released in 1998, made slightly more money than it did during its 1999 run. So of all the movies released in the year, it's 20th. But Shakespeare in Love knocks it down a peg because that movie just wouldn't go away. Directed by Tim Burton, written by Kevin Yeager and Andrew Kevin Walker, very, very loosely based on the short story by Washington Irving, and starring Johnny Depp, Christina Ricci as Winona Ryder, a whole bunch of people from Harry Potter and Star Wars, including Michael Dumbledore Gambon, Miranda Rita Skeeter Richardson, and Richard Mr. Dursley Griffiths, along with Darth Sidious, Maul, and Tyrannus, Ian McDiarmid, Ray Park, and Christopher Lee, and Ravenous's Jeffrey Jones, Casper Van Dien, for some reason,
Johnny Rico,
Claire Skinner, Mark Pickering, Michael Goff, better known as Alfred, then Tim Burton muse Lisa Marie, and Christopher Walken as the Horseman. Today, we are going to be discussing Sleepy Hollow. So, Becky, you're up. What is Sleepy? If you can do this, okay. I'm very impressed. What is Sleepy Hollow about, Becky? Because I don't know. I still don't get it.
So, let me see if I can give you a summary. Okay, so we open on a headless horseman. So now, actually, we open on Martin Landau. Makes a very brief cameo.
He doesn't even talk. He just sort of grunts. Yeah.
He gets beheaded by the Headless Horseman. Then suddenly, we're in New York City in 1799, and our intrepid detective, Johnny Depp Ichabod Crane, has just found a body. Then we see him talk to, I don't know, like the jailer. I don't know what the terms for
A
these people
judge.
are
I
back
think a
in the
judge.
time.
Yeah.
Oh no, but before when he's talking to the
Oh,
other,
right. Yes. Yep.
which that was kind of like an ACAB moment a little bit. I was like, yo, Tim Burton woke.
Tim Burton super woke.
So anyway, yeah, so we see him have this interaction with the jailer, and we can see that Johnny doesn't agree with their methods, so that we're kind of getting his character that like he's one of the good ones. Then he goes in to talk to the judge, and they're discussing how Ichabod doesn't like how they use these outdated methods to force confessions, and it's really funny because there's literally a guy standing in an Iron Maiden just chilling during this whole time. But Christopher Lee, and this is fun. I think they did this on purpose, but Christopher Lee is like, "Hey, policeman, you have to go to this creepy small town and solve a murder." So it was like a little, like, I thought that was like a little Wicker Man nod, which it's this 50th anniversary, by the way.
Okay.
Happy birthday, Wicker Man.
Good reference.
So then when Ichabod Crane gets to Sleepy Hollow, it's this very like insular little town, and everybody's related to everybody knows everybody, and he starts talking to people, and they tell them that all the murders, it's the Headless Horseman, and he is the ghost of a Hessian who was over here during the Revolution, and he wasn't here for money, he just really liked killing people.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, they eventually get him and behead him, but now his ghost wanders looking for a head, and that's why he's decapitating everyone to get a head. So, Ichabod Crane, while he is trying to solve these murders, stays with the big fancy man in town, Barthis? It's Michael Gambon.
Michael Gambon.
Michael Gambon and Miranda Richardson, and his lovely daughter Katrina, who like Johnny kind of gets the hots for her, and vice versa. So he's going around investigating, and it comes to Ichabod's attention that there seems to be some sort of conspiracy with all the people in power in town. So the minister and the judge and the notary public, who was played by Alfred from Batman. And Alfred tells him, like, okay, here's the deal. One of the girls who died, she was pregnant and had gotten married secretly to the Van Garretts? I don't know, a really rich family. And she was going to inherit everything. So then, first, I think her husband gets killed. Then she gets killed. It's like down the line of succession.
Yep.
Clearly someone is trying to get that money.
Yep.
But the notary says, we didn't know about that part. We were just in on letting them get married secretly. Yep. So that people didn't know about this inheritance. But we weren't trying to murder anybody. Then I forget what the inciting incident is, but we end up in a church. Oh, that's right, because Ichabod, they're like, oh, look, this is the tree of the dead. And like when you cut it, blood comes out, and so you're like, ooh, this is spooky. Yeah. But he goes in there, and it's just because there's a bunch of decapitated heads. Yeah. But this is where we take a turn for suddenly Ichabod Crane is willing to permit the idea of the supernatural, and he realizes that this is the portal to hell where the Headless Horseman comes out. And those are all heads he's collected, and he's collecting a head because he doesn't have one, but he's being controlled. Fast forward, we're back at the church. There's a free-for-all. Headless Horseman's going to kill some people. Then it turns into this like shit show Coen Brothers thing where there's like an accidental Mexican standoff and everybody like kills each other on accident. Yeah. And then also Katrina dies, we think. Oh, and by the way, he's found like a sigil that has what he thinks is the evil eye, but I was like, yo, I think that's a Hamsa, and it's like a protection thing. Anyway, he thinks that Katrina's dead and that she's evil and a witch. Something happens. He's fine. She just used like a little bit of good magic to like protect them. Oh, also Ichabod's mom was a witch. Yep. And so he's like he has like sympathy for the supernatural. Actually, let me rewind. That's why he's willing to believe that there's a portal to hell in the decapitation
Because
tree.
his mom, Lisa Marie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, then Christina Ricci is going to go see her stepmom, Miranda Richardson.
Yep.
But, you know, she's been acting a little sketch.
Yes.
She's been, like, oh, yeah, because we see, Ichabod sees her banging somebody.
Yep, in the woods.
Yeah, and she does my least favorite cliche of, like, slicing the palm of her hand. Like, if you're going to do a blood sacrifice, nobody's going to do it in the middle of the palm of your hand. There's, like, a million nerve endings, and you won't move your hand. Sorry, I saw it, and I was like, not again. Anyway, so then Katrina's there, but Ichabod, I think, has an epiphany that what is going to happen is the person who's been behind it all is Miranda Richardson, the wife of the now deceased Michael Gambon, because she is a witch. And she was the one, because I forgot to tell you, when they told the story of the Hessian who became the Headless Horseman, 2 little girls saw it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So guess what Miranda Richardson did? She was one of the little girls, and she pledged her soul to Satan because the villagers had murdered her. No.
It's a land dispute, basically.
Yes.
Like,
yes. Yeah, she was like, her family was really poor, so they were back in the day. Sorry, I'm jumping around too much. We find out she's the one behind all of this because her family was poor, her dad had died, her mom had died because they thought she was a witch. And so then the villagers ran them all out of town. So she was very angry and wanted revenge. So when she saw them kill the Headless Horseman, she pledged her soul to Satan to be able to control the Headless Horseman so that she could get revenge for her family. That's what's going on. And she was trying to kill Katrina. Johnny Depp has figured out at this point. So there's a big, the final confrontation. He's found the Headless Horseman's original head. He gives it to him. So now the Headless Horseman is happy. And suddenly he starts regenerating all his muscle and tissue like a Hellraiser kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly now it's Christopher Walken with pointy teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And he has to drag Miranda Richardson to hell. And
Yep.
so that is the climax conclusion of that. And then the denouement, Katrina and Ichabod Crane are going to start their new life in old-timey New York City.
And that's literally
and
the
that's
ending.
The story.
Which is a very strange ending. I could not in a million years could I have recounted the plot even anywhere nearly as articulately as that. I get lost in this movie a lot. So congratulations. And if you were able to listen to that and follow that, congratulations to you as well.
I apologize to everyone.
That is honestly the most succinct way anybody could ever possibly explain what this movie's about. So
it was just also an ADHD chronology.
But it's an ADHD movie. This movie will not it will not sit still. Anyway, we'll get to that in a little bit. So anyway, opening at number 2 behind the James Bond film The World Is Not Enough, Sleepy Hollow took in $30 million in its opening weekend, going on to gross an impressive $101 million domestically and $206 million worldwide, despite never hitting number 1 at the box office. The less great news, however, is that its domestic gross barely covered the budget. At $100 million, Sleepy Hollow is one of the most expensive movies of its time. Development of Sleepy Hollow began in 1993 when special effects makeup artist Yeager had an idea of turning Washington Irving's story into a feature-length slasher film. He teamed up with Seven screenwriter Walker to write a treatment. They reimagined Ichabod Crane as a New York investigator rather than a Connecticut schoolmaster, and the only things that their vision had in common with Irving's work is the names Ichabod Crane, Katrina Van Tassel, a Headless Horseman, and the town of Sleepy Hollow. But things went remarkably smoothly at first, and the duo got producer Scott Rudin on board, with Yeager set to direct until studio interference saw the movie descend into development hell, much like the characters at the end of the movie. In 1998, Sherry Lansing, CEO of Paramount, brought the project back to life and suggested it could mark a good return to form for Tim Burton. Burton's career had fallen a little off track, having bowed out of the Batman franchise in the mid-90s and coming off one of his biggest misfires, Mars Attacks, in 1996, only to find himself in the midst of the biggest movie that never got made, Superman Lives, through 1998. When that project finally imploded for good. Becky, are you a Mars Attacks fan? I know there's a lot of Mars Attacks.
Okay, so Here's my horrible confession. I've never watched all of it.
Okay, great. I think that's the right answer. It is a barely watchable movie. I'm going to be completely honest. Francis Ford Coppola signed on as producer, and Burton agreed to do the film, bringing 3 of his most reliable collaborators with him: star Johnny Depp, composer Danny Elfman, and production designer Tim Heinrichs, who may well be the most beloved figure among a certain class of cinema nerds in modern history, whose name nobody actually knows. Heinrichs had been an art director and production designer who helped create the distinct aesthetic that is so closely associated with Burton in Edward Scissorhands, Beetlejuice, Dark Shadows, and Batman Returns. He also served as production designer for Fargo, The Big Lebowski, 2 Pirates of the Caribbean movies, Captain America: The First Avenger, Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and Glass Onion. He won an Oscar and a BAFTA for Sleepy Hollow, and I know all of this because his brother was my history professor in college. The spectacular cinematography of the film was provided by Emmanuel Lubezki, whose previous work included Meet Joe Black, Reality Bites, and Alfonso Cuarón's A Little Princess and Great Expectations. He would go on to work with Cuarón on Y Tu Mamá También, Children of Men, and Gravity, and with Terrence Malick with The New World, The Tree of Life, To the Wonder, Night of Cups, and Song to Song. He would go on to win 3 Oscars, 1 for Gravity and 2 for Alejandro Iñárritu's Birdman and The Revenant. Critical reception for Sleepy Hollow tended to be good but not great. In some, most said it's definitely not sleepy but is pretty hollow. It holds a rating of 70 on Rotten Tomatoes and 65 on Metacritic. Its unlikely most enthusiastic admirer was Rolling Stone's Peter Travers, who in an uncharacteristically effusive review wrote, quote, "Even when the narrative stalls from too many detours and decapitations, Sleepy Hollow is gorgeous filmmaking that brims over with funhouse thrills and ravishing romance. The classic Washington Irving tale of a headless horseman who rides at midnight to terrorize a New York village of Dutch settlers proves a natural for Tim Burton. Like Batman, Sleepy Hollow has been done as a cartoon and 2 live-action TV shows, but never like this. Leave it to Burton, inspired by the look of the British scare flicks with Christopher Lee, who does a cameo, and his own feelings about isolation and loss to make a lively art out of being alone in the dark." It was well received by some other big-name critics as well, including Todd McCarthy in Variety, Jay Hoberman in The Village Voice, Richard Corliss in Time Magazine, and Roger Ebert in the Chicago Sun-Times, who called it, quote, "the best-looking horror film since Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula." Bram Stoker's Dracula comes up a lot in Sleepy Hollow reviews, and the words gorgeous and stunning are strewn about liberally through most, and so are the words dull, flawed, and convoluted. Jonathan Rosenblum in Chicago Reader summed up the middle-of-the-road opinion, writing, quote, "If Burton's writers had come up with anything even a fraction as good as Irving, I'd have no cause for complaint. But they've delivered such a hackneyed and hokey hand-me-down a serial killer movie plot with a predictably unpredictable twist at the end that I've already forgotten most of it. Maybe this doesn't matter as long as the beautiful images keep coming, and thanks to Burton's artistry, they do. Even if his publicists are so oblivious to this virtue that only one of the many stills given to the press, the one running with this review, even hints at such a distinction. But beauty separated from meaning, apart from mood and isolated bursts of emotion, isn't nearly as likely to be as memorable as beauty arising from commingling with a good story. That's why Sleepy Hollow is a ravishing visual experience, a pretty good, if far from challenging, vehicle for some talented American and English actors, and a mediocre serial killer and horror movie. It looks a lot better than any Hammer horror movie I ever remember seeing, just as Ed Wood looks much better than any Wood movie that comes to mind. But I doubt I'll be thinking much about Sleepy Hollow a month from now." But Mike LaSalle in the San Francisco Chronicle eviscerated the film, writing, quote, "As Crane, Depp's performance is irrelevant in the best sense of the word. He has nothing to work with. Burton's direction is non-existent, and Andrew Kevin Walker's script is without a moment of tension or truth. So Depp comes up with stuff. He winces, blinks, sniffs, purses his lips, and acts fussy. Sometimes an actor can either mock the proceedings or go down with the ship. Depp finds the comedy. He fares better than Christina Ricci, who is completely out of her depth. Sleepy Hollow has no conviction, no sincerity behind it. It does have the visual effects whoosh of a headless horseman galloping out from the bowels of hell through a hole in a tree, and the momentary kick of seeing Christopher Walken growling like a maniac as the horseman in his earthly incarnation. That amounts to 2 minutes of amusement, tops. After that, all Sleepy Hollow has is a smart attitude, as though it's sending up the sort of genuinely frightening horror film its director is incapable of creating. Plus, it has heads. Lots of bouncing heads. Fake blood and rubberhead aficionados should run, not walk, to this wretched, pointless picture. So that's what people thought about Sleepy Hollow at the time, and now we get to tell everybody what we thought about Sleepy Hollow 24 years later. So joining us to help us with this is our friend from our very own The Monsters That Made Us podcast, Dan Colón. Dan, welcome back.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me.
You recently traveled to my neck of the woods on your podcast and discussed a 1999 movie of note that is also part of the Universal horror canon in the form of the Brendan Fraser classic, The Mummy.
That's right. Yeah, that episode is currently streaming now, wherever you get your podcasts. We released it at the end of November. That I was thinking of you guys when we were recording that one, and I was like, I purposely did not listen to that episode before we recorded ours because I wanted to, I wanted to do our own thing with it and not risk, being influenced. So I have no idea what you guys said about The Mummy. I should go back and remedy that now. But I love that we have that in common, both shows.
I love that movie. Joey did not like it because he didn't see it. Yeah. He didn't see it at the right time. Like, he didn't see it when it came out. He had no nostalgia for it, and it's just not his cup of tea. But he's wrong. We had Chris Cluey as our guest on that episode.
Oh.
Chris and I both love it. So that was a good one. All right, let's talk Sleepy Hollow. Let's talk some Tim Burton as well. Becky, I'll start with you. So take it away. First of all, when did you first see Sleepy Hollow? What is your, I know you're a horror gal, but what's your Tim Burton relationship?
I was trying to decide this today, and I think it's really between Beetlejuice and Batman Returns
as your favorite Tim Burton movies.
Yes.
Okay. Good choices, first of all.
Thank you.
But also I noticed that those are older Tim Burton movies. What is your life with Tim Burton been like?
So this is where, and we talked about this in the last podcast, because I grew up super evangelical.
Right.
I wasn't allowed to have some of the spooky things, but I knew about Edward Scissorhands because kids in kindergarten would put scissors in their hands and be like, but and it was always on TV, and I'm trying to think Batman would have been the first Tim Burton movie that I saw, because I was already, I got really into Batman when I was 14 because the animated series was on when I would get home from school.
Right.
So I saw Batman and I loved it, and I loved the production design. So I've actually always, I mean, let's not talk about his later period stuff, but
we're going to at some point.
But in terms of my fanhood, I was a really big fan of his 80s and 90s stuff.
When did you first see this movie?
I'm trying to remember if I saw it in theaters, but I definitely rented it literally almost exactly 20 years ago.
Okay.
Around Halloween, and watched it with my roommates in college.
And had you seen it since then? Since today?
No.
Okay.
When you said, but I have one of those memories where I can I remembered enough of it that I felt comfortable of I can watch it again and be good to go. I think this is my third viewing, because I do think I saw it in theaters.
So that's interesting, because I saw it in theaters for sure. I remember seeing it in theaters very, very vividly. But rewatching it, and this is probably the first time I'd rewatched it since it came out, I don't remember anything about it. I remember some imagery and sort of basically the plot, but none of the conspiracy stuff. There's no way I could have told you what the actual plot of the movie was, right? I don't think I still could. But I certainly was watching it being oh, I don't remember really anything about this. I just remember sort of vibes about it, and it's very much a vibes kind of a movie.
Actually, I think it was really, it was, and this tends to be how my mind works anyway, but I remembered mostly specific imagery from it.
Mm-hmm.
And the witch stuff.
Yeah. So Dan, I know you're the sort of genres that you like. This again seems pretty up your alley, but what is your past experience with this movie and where Tim Burton fits into your sort of nerd canon
As a kid, I had been very familiar with Batman, Batman Returns, Edward Scissorhands, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Mars Attacks. But I don't think I really got keyed into who Tim Burton was as a filmmaker until probably high school, certainly college.
Mm-hmm.
Once I started studying film, I started to like really go back and look at Tim Burton's work as okay, these are all the same filmmaker. And then I started noticing what they all had in common and whatnot. And I didn't see Sleepy Hollow until about college, and I remember like being really into it, but it's not one that I put on a lot. Before we started recording, I had to I mentioned not having remembered last time I put this one on. I own it, so I liked it enough to buy a copy, but it's not one that I've watched at least in the past uh, 10 years, maybe.
Okay.
So it was fun to revisit this. And I think, like you guys, I suspect, I really love Burton, his early stuff. And when I was looking
Yeah.
at his filmography, it occurred to me that this might be the last Tim Burton movie that I really like, and then it just drops off from here up until the present day. I would say, yeah, everything he did from Pee-wee's Big Adventure up until this is like the best Tim Burton. I will say that I do love Mars Attacks.
Do you really?
I do, yeah. But I mean, admittedly, it has also been some time since I last watched it. But I'm not gonna say it's his best work.
Yeah.
But what I love about this period of his work is that he hadn't, like, the snake hadn't yet started to eat the tail, right? I find that like after Sleepy Hollow, he made Planet of the Apes, which good for him for trying something different.
Yeah.
But it to me it reads like that failed so spectacularly that he was like, okay, fuck you. I'm just going to do the same shit you guys love ad nauseum and dial it to 11 for the rest of my career. And that's what you're going to get.
Yep.
He stopped being an innovative filmmaker after Sleepy Hollow, or after Planet of the Apes, I would say. But even Planet of the Apes is kind of plain and generic. So
yeah.
At least here he's having fun with the visual style. I really loved the aesthetic of Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah.
I do agree with you guys that the script is a little bit confusing and unnecessarily convoluted, but if you're here for style, this one has it in spades. So I really enjoyed revisiting Sleepy Hollow, and I was pleasantly surprised at how much I still enjoy it.
Becky, I'm gonna disagree with Dan slightly here, and love to hear what you have to say about it. But like, okay, so I basically agree with the premise, Dan, of like what became of Tim Burton. But I have to say, like, first of all, Big Fish.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think
That's
is
like exactly what I was going to say. That's why I was like looking at my phone, because I was like, wait, that was like 2003, right?
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't just that it was still good. It was like he was actually trying something different.
Yes, and it's like heartfelt. It's like when Tim Burton works, it's like the Edward Scissorhands magic, right? It's like the weirdness and the aesthetic works, but also the like genuine humanity of it works for me. And it's so like people I don't think remember Big Fish because it was a fairly sort of under the radar movie.
Yeah.
Like it definitely wasn't a big sort of like splashy blockbuster like Sleepy Hollow was, or even Planet of the Apes, and didn't sort of seem like a Tim Burton movie on the surface. So I think it tends to get overlooked for that reason. But then I also have to say, like, to me, like I again, like, am I like, is Sleepy Hollow the time when Tim Burton was like that was the end? But then I also have to think like, no, I really think the last really great Tim Burton movie was Sweeney Todd, which I think is great. Like, I think Sweeney Todd's really, really good. And I think it, like, again, plays to all of his strengths, and visually it's spectacular. But it was happening amidst his kind of like decline before he started going into like Dumbo territory and like, and all this sort of nonsense. So I kind of agree with you, like like the premise of it. I agree with Dan, but like I'm going to nitpick some of the details.
Sure. My argument is completely without nuance.
Sure.
I mean, if I were to go back in and really evaluate some of the stuff he did after this, I mean, I remember really liking Big Fish, and there are things that I like in the movies that he made since.
Yeah.
But I mean, just to really make a general statement, I feel like this is sort of like the nexus of where his career sort of became a different thing.
I would agree with that. Becky, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. Because I was thinking about that. It's because this is like the missing link movie where I think it's got enough of his old style, but he was we're beginning to see the first indications that I don't want to say has given up, but like it's his later period. And I mean, of course, it would be like right at the turn of the millennium. That would be, when that happened. I think that's interesting.
Yeah. There's so much in this movie that I had to like keep reminding myself, like Tim Burton directed this. Like in a lot of ways, it doesn't feel like Tim Burton. Of course, in some ways it does. In some of the like the color palette, it was like some of this feels like Batman. Some of this feels like the flashbacks of Edward Scissorhands. But a lot of it didn't feel like Tim Burton to me, which I really liked. I like it. Like it occurred to me, like, oh, he's trying to do something outside of his comfort zone here, and I got to respect that.
All right. Generally speaking, Becky, we'll start with you. Like, what do you think of this movie?
I like it. I don't love it.
Yeah.
I think what I would call it, and I feel like I would have enjoyed it more if we were in Halloween. This feels like, do you remember when they were talking about cozy horror?
Yes.
Online? Like, this feels like exactly what that is.
Yeah.
It actually feels like if you had like maybe like a young teenager that you wanted to see if they were into horror, like this would be good to show them. Because it's like gross things happen, but they're all very clean.
You're right. And like there's some visceral beheadings, but like there's something about it that's not gross.
Honestly, most of the beheadings are played for laughs too.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how Burton is able to get away with this stuff, and what keeps any of his stuff from being horror. He plays a lot of it for laughs. Like Johnny Depp is almost doing this like Buster Keaton kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which that I think for me, and this is just, I think a lot of it has to do with my personal taste and my love for the serial killer genre, is that the script didn't go with the vibes.
Yes. Yeah. So I kept thinking, because I was like, when I was watching it, I don't think the first time I watched it, I'm like, oh, the guy who wrote Seven. But I kept thinking about Seven while watching this movie. Right?
And all I could think about is, what would David Fincher's Sleepy Hollow look like?
Yes.
And what would Tim Burton's Seven look like?
And I was like, this was kind of like boring colonial Seven, but it basically is Seven. Like it's not that different.
I really couldn't stop thinking about that, because before I read that Yeager was supposed to direct it, I was like, I bet someone else was supposed to direct this.
Yeah.
Because this, I think, was supposed to be like a straight up procedural.
Yes.
And that's one thing I thought was so interesting about it, is because you give Burton the script for procedural, and even though all the dialogue is the same, it, like, with the atmosphere and the props and the specific acting, specifically from Depp, he's able to make it kind of like kooky spooky.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I read, like, Yeager had said at some point that his vision was to have a like gruesome beheading every 5 minutes.
Dude, I want that.
Like it was just going to be an all-out, like, what if the Headless Horseman went on a rampage kind of a movie. And I completely agree with that too. Like, I think one of the ways that this movie doesn't just quite come together is exactly that feeling of like, the people who were envisioned to make this movie are not the people who made the movie. And what's there is still something that's like quite stunning and works on a lot of levels, but like there's a core to this missing, that feels like it's because it's sort of transferred too many hands and was too far distilled down. But I think saying like I like it but don't love it, that's kind of where I land, and I do want to talk some more specific gripes that I have with it a little bit later on. But Dan, what about you? What's your final analysis?
Yeah, after listening to you guys, I wasn't coming in here like ready to be like, yeah, Sleepy Hollow is like the best thing I've seen forever, right? But you're definitely bringing to light some issues that I didn't necessarily pick up on. I just watched it this afternoon to prepare sort of last minute for you guys, and so my thoughts might be a little half baked here, but I do think that like where I ultimately land with this, will I put it on next Halloween? Probably not. Will I watch it again sometime soon? Who knows? But it definitely feels like something that I would love to put on in the background because it's so pretty to look at. I could definitely see this being one of those movies for me, like a comfort movie, like you guys were kind of sort of talking about, where like I'm not sure what to put on. Oh, Sleepy Hollow is cool. It's got really great production design. I'll just put that on. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I thought the same thing about Blade Runner for a really long time. It took me a long time to come around to Blade Runner. I always thought it was beautiful, but then eventually it clicked, fortunately. Not that this is Blade Runner, but but yeah, I think this is sort of like the last, again, to take all the nuance out of this argument, I think that it's like sort of the last really good thing Tim Burton did in his career, in this like really great productive period of his career, the 90s. And yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's okay for this movie to be that. I don't think it has to be amazing, but it definitely, I realized sort of why it's taken me so long to revisit it. It doesn't necessarily stick in my mind as something like, oh, I got to put Sleepy Hollow on. There's something there that's not there.
Well, it's not a breezy watch, and it's under 2 hours long and feels like it's 3 hours, and that's a problem.
Sure,
right? It never invests in any sequence of ideas. It never invests in any parts of its own story. It keeps like meandering around from one thing to the next, trying to get to the ending and just taking forever to get there. And it has these really wonderful set pieces, the scenes with the horsemen like chasing people down. They're all so well choreographed and they're so like intense and great. And like, the whole sort of atmosphere and music and sound effects of it is great. And then it's just sort of like, well, what was that for? And then and then it goes on to something else. And I'm like, okay, there's no momentum to this movie at all. And I think that's one of the reasons why it just feels like a slog sometimes.
I wonder if Ichabod and Katrina had been closer in age, if that element of the story, if they could have played that more romantic, right? If that would have helped, because the whole movie, I can feel them sort of dancing around this romantic subplot, and I'm like, I had to Google like how old they were at the time. I think Johnny Depp was 36 and she was 18.
Yep,
and like it's like technically okay, but that doesn't make me feel better about it. It feels a little bit uncomfortable that they kind of want you to believe that that's what's going on, and so because they didn't fully commit. Or because they maybe couldn't fully commit to that, that the fact that there's no real connection there only makes this movie a little bit more flat.
Totally weird that like I thought from the beginning, like, oh, they're like this is a romance, like they're together.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what the intention was, but because of the ages, I'm like, I don't know if I buy this, and so it definitely impacted the rest of it for me. And because there's no emotional heart to this movie, then now we're just watching it for beheadings and beautiful cinematography, right? So it makes me wonder, if it would have improved the movie overall if that had been different.
Becky, I'm a Christina Ricci stan. Let's talk about her in this movie.
She's not doing a lot.
No, she's not.
It was, oh, you know what I did think though? Is actually with the accents, the bleached hair and bleached eyebrows. I was thinking about her filmography. I'm like, was Christina Ricci like our Mia Goth?
I mean, kind of, yeah, in some ways. right?
So that's the good thing. It's
Yeah.
like, I was like, oh, this is cool. And yeah, like you, I love her, so I'm probably like not hating on her enough
Yeah.
because
Yes.
she didn't really do a lot. But I will say my tendency when I watch these and I see a performance fall flat, I tend to blame the director rather than the actress, especially since we know that she can act.
I no, completely agree. So first of all, like, yeah, she was Wednesday Addams and, you know, and the girl from Casper. And like, so she was sort of like a little, you know, sort of late Gen Xers horror gateway drug, in a certain way. And I completely agree. Like, my profound love of Christina Ricci gives her performance in this like probably way too much leeway, that I should be a lot more critical of it than I am. First of all, when I said she plays Winona Ryder, what I meant was this should have been Winona Ryder, and the reason it's not Winona Ryder is because she and Johnny Depp fucking hated each other at this point.
Oh, at that point, because I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I guess the 1989 was over.
Like, that was well over. It had gotten bad, and there's no way he could have cast them both. But like, if Tim Burton had his way, I'm sure this would have been Winona Ryder, and it would have been a much more logical and much more sort of believable pairing. I don't know whose idea it was to cast Christina Ricci. That, to me, reeks of a studio decision, right? More than anything else. But yeah, the age difference is terrible. Their chemistry is actually pretty good. Like,
they were in like at least 2 other movies together.
yeah. I don't have a problem with like they're both sort of at their best when they're together, but to say that she is like way over her head here is generous. It is profoundly miscast, and just the age difference as a romance, and just like this character, like, I don't understand why these characters like each other. It just doesn't, like,
Because they're hot.
because they're hot, and again, yeah, like, they have
And I mean,
really
honestly,
good chemistry, but
it's back in the day. So that's why the age difference didn't bother me.
Right,
Because I'm like,
right.
in reality, they probably would have been having him marry like a 14-year-old or something.
Yes, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, I think that's why it doesn't bother me so much either. Is that there is that sort of like historical, I don't know, shroud there that, like, right.
It's very historically accurate.
Makes it right. It makes it seem like less gross. But like, yeah, it's I'm grossed out by Johnny Depp for other reasons now, and very put off by Johnny Depp for other reasons now. But yeah, this wasn't why. But yeah, this just does not. It just doesn't work. This is bad casting.
Yeah, and it's like, I feel like with their look, you know, it's like, oh, she's Dutch, and we're trying to do like a girl with the pearl earring thing, but I'm like, I know that Italian girl does not have that blonde hair, like.
Although she does in Yellow Jackets, but that's a.
But like,
Sorry.
they make it look.
Yes.
Like this like just looks like
it ain't that blonde.
Somehow back in 1799, she learned how to bleach her hair.
Yes. Yeah. Well, but also, like, there's a lot of stylization in general. Like, it's, you know, there's no way that Miranda Richardson's hair is like that color either in 1799.
Or that dress, like.
Although she was using witchcraft, so who knows? Maybe.
Oh, you know what? That actually is a good point, though. I'm going to use my witchcraft to look cunty.
Yeah. Here's the other problem I have with this movie, right? And these are just like sort of broad strokes problems that I have. This is like an insanely good cast. I love all of these fucking actors, and I couldn't point to a single performance in this where I'm like, that's a great performance. Like, not one. They're all wasted. Every single one of these actors is wasted.
That review that you read, I'm now seeing it, where they said, like, Tim Burton's not doing any directing.
Nope.
That's what it is. Because in my head, I'm thinking, like, well, it's got signature style, but I'm like, that's all his production designer. I mean, yes, he does get, you know, direct the production designer what to do and get the final say, but he's not directing the actors.
Yep.
And I think because he hasn't made the decisions for what he wants the actors to do, And my personal opinion is my guess would be less than laziness. It's more that this is not a script that was written with him in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the man could never do like a straightforward serial killer movie. So I think he didn't know what he wanted the actors to do. Which I know, Dan, you said you went to film school, but that was like one of the most important things I learned, is that like the measure of a successful director is getting across the point that you want to communicate. Like,
Sure.
did you do what you wanted to do?
That's, it's a good point that you made, John, that because I had the same thought. I was like, this cast is great, but it didn't really occur to me until you said it that they don't really turn in noteworthy performances, right? They do what they are known to do.
Yeah.
Michael Gambon shows up, and he is Michael Gambon in this
He's the
movie.
closest thing to something that stands out as like a good performance, but he doesn't have enough to do. Like there's just not enough of him.
Yeah, everyone shows up and kind of does their thing. Even like I feel like Christopher Lee is in this movie to be Christopher Lee because he was in Hammer movies back in the 60s.
It's a stunt casting. It's like
I think
Landau.
it was exactly it was Hammer and the Wicker Man. I don't know. I could be reading into that, but like I feel like that was intentional.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
So yeah, oh man, I'm having hell of a realization right now. Thank
you. The only performance that really stands out to me as like one that I really latch on to is like it's actually pretty great. Is Mark Pickering, who plays young Masbeth. I think he's pretty great, but like and he's given a decent amount of stuff to do, but nothing else. Like, what's Michael Goff doing here? Like, anybody could be that, and this is the thing that Tim Burton does all the time, though. Too, it's just like stunt casts. He's like, I like this guy and I like this guy, so I'm just going to shove him in my movie and put him in front of the camera and see what happens. I mean, even like the best thing I'll say beyond that is like it's Casper Van Dien's least bad performance ever. He's fine. He doesn't do anything, so he's fine. But even like Jeffrey Jones, who's a deeply problematic person, but like an actor that I love, has nothing to do here. Like he's just there and just sort of.
Yeah, I think of Jeffrey Jones in my favorite Ed Wood movie, or Ed Wood movie. In my favorite Tim Burton movie, Ed Wood. He's like swinging for the fence in that movie. Here, he's just kind of Jeffrey Jones. And how do you put Jeffrey Jones in your movie and not give him a whole lot to do?
Yeah. Or Ian McDiarmid, or like,
these guys are all proven to be capable of.
One bothered me the most because when he showed up as the doctors, I was like, oh, they're doing Gorky Park. That's what this is going to be. He's going to like chew scenery. Mm-hmm. And then he didn't do it. And I was very disappointed because I feel like that's what that casting was referencing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think that Tim Burton is like, he's like, to me, this is a legacy actor, and I want to put him in my movie to honor him in some way, but like not have him actually do anything, but just kind of be there. I don't know. I just feel like that's most of the cast here, except for Christina Ricci, who has to do a lot of heavy lifting. And actually, Miranda Richardson is pretty good here as well. Like she's given quite a bit to do, and she's always kind of a delicious.
Yeah, I mean, in the third act, she's given quite a bit to do, and I was happy to see that because I'm not really familiar with Miranda Richardson as a whole. Like I'm sure I've seen her in other things, but she's not one of those actors that sticks in my mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, when she is finally revealed to be sort of the mastermind of everything, I was like, great, cool. So we're going to get some scenery chewing, and she's going to get to die in a really cool way. And she does, kind of. So love that.
Yeah, I think ultimately the thing that bothers me about this, so there's okay. One is that everybody is trying really hard. Nobody's phoning anything in this movie, right? It's just they don't have anything to do. There's just like Tim Burton is like really trying to make a movie here, and Rick Heinrichs and Danny Elfman are like trying to make a movie here, and it's all spectacular and gorgeous looking, and all very elegantly put together. And there's not a single like technical flaw with this movie, except that there's never anything there. It's never about something. It never like it never drives, it never moves, it never carries any steam whatsoever, and it feels like everybody's like pushing a boulder uphill the entire time, and it can be really frustrating to watch. I think the other thing, and this is something that like Becky alluded to earlier, and I think this is actually really important, like I don't know why, but it really does matter for a movie's kind of like whole feeling and legacy when it's released. And that this movie did not come out before fucking Halloween is absolutely insane. Like, this movie came out in like mid-November, and so it's like neither a Christmas movie nor a Halloween movie. And it's like if Star Wars came out in like March. It's like, that's just like, it just would be wrong. It just doesn't like, and it would like make the movie worse. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the sort of sentimentality we have for these movies is kind of like the aura at which we first saw them. Mm-hmm. And that this movie just gets thrown into the weirdest possible release date. I think that also, like, if it were a Halloween movie that I had Halloween memories around, I think I would forgive a lot of the sort of like more dragging, boring elements of it and be a lot more attached to the sort of beauty and aesthetic of it. But I don't know.
What I was realizing, because I'm just more and more thinking about like, oh, Tim Burton really wasn't doing anything, was he? Because one thing that I was really paying attention to is you could see that they were sort of recreating the like old Dutch masters paintings, like Rembrandt and everything, with the lighting.
Yeah.
But I noticed what I was like, but the blocking isn't very good. Like, having just seen Killers of the Flower Moon, which has like some of the best I've ever seen, like, people weren't placed where they were supposed to be for Matt, because he's clearly going for aesthetics.
Yeah.
But he doesn't seem to be handling the actors very well, not just in terms of their performances, but in terms of where they are on screen.
Yeah, I mean, look, I also think we have to consider the fact that Tim Burton was in like quite a rut at this time, and I'm sure a lot of people know the story of Superman Lives, but like that's what he had just gone through. So he just made Mars Attacks, which is a flop on every possible level, and then like the Superman Lives thing happened, and I would not be at all surprised if like a lot of what we're seeing here is just him kind of being burnt out and aimless and unable to really like tap into something as much as this movie tries to get him there. But yeah, it really just does seem. And like, I don't get the feeling he's kind of phoning it in either. I just kind of feel like he just doesn't know what to do.
He doesn't know, yeah.
And that is ultimately what sort of is the nail in the coffin of, you just have a lot of beautiful images and a lot of beautiful people and not a lot going on. But I also like want to make it entirely clear, like, this is the most beautiful movie from this year. Like, visually, it is one of the most spectacular looking movies I've ever seen. Like, it is. I still watch it. I watched it, and I'm like, my jaw was just. It's so gorgeous. I mean, just like cinema. Like, imagery is so incredible.
I still think Fight Club looks better.
Oh yeah. Like, I might give you that, but like, yeah.
Stanley Kubrick, come on.
Well, yes, that too, right? And this is like Eyes Wide Shut. I mean, there's a lot of movies of that year that are just like, shot for shot incredible. But like, this one, to me, if I had to line those up, like, I would give this the edge. Like, I literally will watch this movie just to look at it for 2 hours, because it is that incredible looking. And like, there's just some shots in here and some like composition in here that is just absolutely stunning.
Yeah, and I think I'm with you, John, and I think maybe my point overall is that, that's okay. It can just be like really beautiful to look at. I'm okay with this, with the narrative that they constructed for this, as sort of familiar as it is. It doesn't really break any new ground. But if it was quotable, like, I don't care. I don't care if the plot beats are.
Name one quote from Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah. Like, it's not a clever
clampa. Yeah.
It's not a clever script.
No.
I would forgive it for that if there were some really great lines of dialogue in this, but nothing immediately springs to mind.
Yeah.
And again, no standout performances here. And like, that's okay. To me, like, the strength of this one definitely is the visual.
Yeah.
And I watch plenty of movies because they look gorgeous. So I don't want to rag too hard on this one. But you guys are all making great points, and I agree with pretty much all of them.
I will say, like, one more thing as just a note. The ending of this movie made me wish there was a sequel. Like, I actually, by the time they're walking off in New York City together, I'm like, okay, I like this world and I like what's been created here, and I would kind of like to see these two, this version of Ichabod Crane, which has nothing to do with Washington Irving's. You could even draw inspiration from Washington Irving's stories or whatever, but I'd like to see these two, like, go on a detective adventure of the supernatural again somewhere else in a better movie. And I had this, like, real yearning at the end of it of, like, oh man, what a cool series this could have been, with this kind of being the misfire.
That's what I
opener.
assumed the ending was about.
Yeah.
That's what I thought they were doing, the, like, leaving it open for a sequel thing.
Like,
right.
Ichabod meets
Ichabod
Frankenstein.
Crane, Private Eye, or whatever.
The possibilities are endless, but, like, again, it's sort of, like, Dan, we were talking about this with Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh boy.
It's like there's just so many missed opportunities because there's so much coolness there, and it's like, give me more, but, like, give me something better. But, like, I like what we've created, just not sort of, the end product. But yeah, I don't remember that feeling the first time I watched it, but watching it this time, I'm like, oh man, I want to know more now. I want a better movie with these same characters and this same aesthetic. And, like, I bet that would be very, very cool. Like, almost like the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies, like something along those lines, but with a more sort of, like, supernatural spin. But I think that ship has sailed, unfortunately. I don't think we're going to get that movie anymore. But I would love to see, like, this vision of Ichabod Crane have a series of movies where he, like, interacts with a bunch of supernatural beings, and, like, the Wolfman and Frankenstein and whatever else. I think that'd be fucking great. If you can, I don't know. I mean, a lot of that stuff's got to be in the public domain now, so I think pretty much anybody could just go ahead and make it. But what would you say is, like, the best thing about this movie, if we're going to be? Because I want to make it clear, like, none of us are shitting on this movie at all. I think, like, we all have things that we really, really like about it. We're just all three very kind of frustrated with.
No, well, I always find more negative to say about things I like, because you know what I mean. Like, if I don't like something, I tend to not want to discuss it.
Yes.
But when I do like something, I'm like, okay, well, where did it go wrong? What could have been better?
Yeah.
Rather than just say, oh, I love this, I love this, I love this. Yeah. So I'm right there with you, John.
Do you have, I'm just curious, do you have any movies that you think are absolutely perfect, or do you always find, like, flaws?
I try to be kind. And, my favorite movies have flaws, and sometimes I love them because of flaws. Like, I don't think there's anything that's absolutely, truly 100% perfect, although I do think that that's it's subjective, right? I can always find something, I suppose.
So it's basically the same thing you guys are saying. It's the visuals. That's why you watch this movie. Like, it's not the performances. It's not the screenplay. Just the production design, costume design, cinematography. Obviously, like, Lubezki, like, won, like, 3 Oscars in a row.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, he's absolutely one of the best. So of course this looks great.
That's the other thing about this movie. Like, there's nobody involved with making it who isn't awesome.
Colleen Atwood was really cooking when she made that dress for Miranda Richardson. I'm, like, obsessed with it.
John, I actually think that might speak to how, like, this movie is actually pretty decent, and everyone was kind of phoning it in. That's how good they were, that they could just sort of, like,
maybe
phone it in, and it's not absolute dog shit.
That's exactly right.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't like. I'm on the fence about that because I don't know that everybody was phoning it in. Like, I don't know. To me, it just feels like a bunch of people with sort of a different idea that it never quite, like, the ships just kind of pass each other, right?
I think maybe instead of like, I don't think anybody's phoning it in like, oh, I'm just punching him in 9 to 5, like that.
Yeah.
I think they're not passionate about it.
Right.
Is what I see.
Okay, that's a better way of articulating it. I think. I think
I think they're doing high quality work. They're not like phoning it in that sense, but they don't have this burning desire to create art.
Right. Nobody was on set like, this is going to be my life's work.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I do wonder if they thought it would be better than it ended up being, though. I don't know. Like, I do now definitely want to see, like, David Fincher's Colonial 7, because, like, that sounds like a fucking awesome
I've been thinking about it all day.
And, like, we came so close with this to being that, but if you'd had told me, like, the first time I watched it that I should be thinking about the movie Seven while watching it, I'd be like, it never even crossed my mind the first time that the movie Seven and this movie had any similar pedigree.
As soon as his name came on screen, I was like, oh,
now that I know his name, I'm like, oh, it's the same movie, basically. Like, there's it's the plot is almost, I mean, it's not identical, but, like, the pacing of it is very similar. It's very sort of, like, meandering in the way that Seven is, but Seven works because it has a
director who really cares.
Yes, and a consistent,
he cares too much,
and a consistent tone and pace that, like, it doesn't jump around so frenetically as this does all the time.
I can't stop. I'm sorry. All I can think about is Johnny Depp being like Ernest Hemingway once said, just walking through old-timey New York. I actually had a quick thing that I was, you mentioned how they said this is the best looking horror film since Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yes.
And I'm like, yes, because they are drawing from German Expressionism, which is the shit.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Absolutely.
So I had something to say to that, similar to that. So obviously Bram Stoker's Dracula is going to be the reference, but to plug the Monsters That Made Us, we started this new season with Dracula 1979, which we also talked about Bram Stoker's Dracula in that episode, and how Dracula 1979 was sort of like, I think what I said was that movie walked so that Bram Stoker's Dracula could run.
Is that the one with Langella? Yeah.
So, like, I was watching Sleepy Hollow thinking of Dracula 79 because I had just watched it 2 months ago. And I was like, oh man, this is like, all the gray with like pops of color. This is really cool. And then when you guys started talking about the Coppola film, like, it makes sense. It's, that was fresh in everybody's mind in the late 90s.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love how, like, I don't know. I loved that visual continuity. I don't know that there's necessarily a through line there, but just something I noticed, mostly because I just watched Dracula, which is a great Dracula movie. If your audience hasn't seen it.
Also, speaking of your purview, I was reminded with the windmill scene at the end.
Oh, I wrote that down too. No, I just loved that there was a climactic moment on a windmill, much like Frankenstein.
Yeah, like Frankenstein. I'm like, it's almost like shot the same way too. I was like, is this a direct nod to Frankenstein?
And like Johnny was definitely doing like some silent movie comedy acting.
Yeah. There's some Buster Keaton.
I was like, like when he was like sort of like stumbling around, I'm just like, Buster Keaton ass bitch.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as Becky pointed out, Frankenstein also German expressionist. So I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's nail on the head right there.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And I'm a big Hammer horror fan as well. So like, I was really digging the vibe of this one. I think that's why maybe I enjoy this one more than most, because it just does a lot of things that I do enjoy in that way. So I just, like, you're all right about the script and the performances and all of that. But this one scratches itches for me.
Yeah.
in a really nice way. So I give it more credit than it probably deserves, truthfully.
I don't know. It's like, do we give it more credit than it deserves, or do we give it more criticism than it deserves? I'm not really quite sure exactly how I fall on that. Like, am I too hard on this movie, or am I like too generous with it? I actually just do not know.
No, I think you're pretty measured in your assessment.
Yeah.
I think it may read as negative because we spent a whole lot of time talking about things we didn't like, but no, I mean, that's what we do with things we like.
Yeah. I find myself like wanting to like it more than I do, but like that in and of itself,
it's one of those that this is the most frustrating kind of movie to me. It's like it's almost there, but it's like missing a piece.
Yeah,
and this is going to sound so corny, but I think the piece that's missing is passion.
Yes, I think that's
and also a mismatch of director and script.
And Christina Ricci miscast badly. But again, not her fault. No, I completely agree, right? And I think like it's the added frustration of watching it, of thinking of like what could have been if only a couple of things, right, were sort of tweaked. And
I've had that experience 2 days in a row because I decided to rewatch Confessions of a Dangerous Mind last night, and it was the same kind of thing where I'm like, George, you're almost there, George Clooney.
Yeah.
Like, so there's a couple of sequences that are like absolutely like spectacular, and then the rest of it is like, what? Why are you making this choice? This doesn't make any sense.
I have not seen that since it came out, but I remember loving it when I saw it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
So that was what I was going to. Is I came out of that, and I mean, I was 18 when it came out, so I'm still like a baby movie fan, but not movie, but like baby cinephile. Jesus, cinephile. But I remember seeing it in the theater with my boyfriend, and I was blown away. And that sequence where they sing "If I Had a Hammer" was like drilled in my head. Mm-hmm. For 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I must have rewatched it at least once in between then, but I decided to rewatch it last night, and I was very sad because I remember it being perfect, and what it is like a director who has potential, but makes some really weird choices a lot of the time.
Okay. I'm not going to watch it ever again then, and just let my memory of it.
Watch that sequence though.
Okay.
Because that was because that's I watched that sequence before I rewatched the whole movie. So I was like, let's fucking go. And then when he has like sort of like what Nolan did with Oppenheimer, like Clooney does this thing where like in each different sort of reality, it's like different lighting.
Right. Yep.
But only the ones that were supposed to be in the studio set had like nice lighting. The other ones, it was just very strange choices that I don't understand, but I must have thought it looked cool when I was 18 in the year 2002.
Yeah.
But similarly to Sleepy Hollow, it's that thing where there's flashes of what it could have been, and that it like frustrates me. Like I want to like go to the multiverse and like see the version that exists.
Yeah. So that's the other thing, is that like, again, I'm now like, I would have watched that movie again at some point, I think, and now I'm not sure that I'm going to, because like, to me, the sort of what I always go to as my example for like how this works is that up until I was in college, like the animated Transformers movie was the coolest movie I've ever seen in my entire life. And like, I just lived with that knowledge for like 20 something years of my life. And then I watched it in college and I was like, it's still gonna, and I'm like, oh my God, this is fucking unwatchably bad. And so I was like, no, I should have just kept the imaginary version of it that was in my head for all that time, and not gone back. And that can be the danger of like going back to a movie, though this is a podcast about movies that all came out 24 years ago. So literally just do that all the time. But sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes movies are still good. Sometimes they're better. Sometimes they're a lot worse. This is sort of right in the middle, I think.
I would say that it's underrated. I wouldn't say that it's like this forgotten classic that everyone needs to go run back and watch, but it is much better than I remembered it being.
I like that. That's a good positive way to leave it, I think. All right, let's let's wrap. Actually, one more question on Tim Burton before we completely close the loop here. Is Alice in Wonderland the real cutoff place between like Tim Burton then and Tim Burton now?
I think so, because I'm going to be honest, I refused to see it because I thought it looked so fucking terrible.
Yeah.
Because I am a huge Alice in Wonderland fan. I grew up with like watching several versions of it, and loving the story. And I feel like that's sort of one of the early things that got me into like surrealism in general. So I remember when the announcement was made that he was directing it, I was really pumped.
Yeah.
And then like when the art came out with the characters, I was like, oh Jesus.
Yeah.
And then I saw the trailer and I was like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that like, you know, the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory kind of was pushing it. That there's a lot about that movie that was great, but it was sort of that moment where you're like, oh, is he just going to like indulge in all of his worst instincts from now on? And I think that's like when Alice in Wonderland kind of confirmed it.
Yeah.
I want to say it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and it's not because I don't like Sweeney Todd, but I don't love it as much as you do.
Yeah. I don't love it either. I think it's great, but I don't like love it.
I love the material, you know, like when I was in, was it middle school? Maybe I was watching like the Angela Lansbury, like filmed live performance version.
Yeah.
And I loved how like lo-fi and kind of gross that production is. And then when I saw this like sheen on Tim Burton's Sweeney Todd, I thought, oh no, this kind of gets rid of all the things I like.
Right. Like I kind of want like a grimy Cockney situation.
So like, I'm not going to say his Sweeney Todd is terrible or it's bad, but I don't love it enough to say that the line that we're drawing is after it. I think it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is where the cart goes over the cliff.
Okay, that's fair. And you know, I'm always hopeful that Tim Burton can like surprise us with something amazing once again. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens at some point. If like,
I would love it. No one would be happier than me to see him like return to form and like do some shit that he really seems to care about.
Beetlejuice 2. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right. So you've both been on the show before, so I'm not going to ask you what your favorite 99 movie is. And Becky, this is probably going to be like asking you what your, you know, like pick a favorite child or whatever, or a favorite pet. But what is, and probably Dan, same thing. It's going to be hard for you. What is your favorite horror movie?
The Shining.
Oh, so that was easy. There you go.
Oh, yeah. Mine's The Evil Dead.
Okay. Wow. That was easy.
Give me a hard one next time,
Wicker
John.
Man is very close.
Though I think, Becky, you said The Shining was your favorite movie of all time last time you were on. So you can't use that one again.
Okay, then The Wicker Man.
Assuming the original, not the Nicholas.
Yes. Oh my God. Not the bees. Although it is really funny to watch that clip where he's in a bear suit and he punches the woman in the face.
Sure.
Which, by the way, I have a whole theory about that. But
what's your theory?
So you know, in Midsummer, when he is in the bear suit.
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I thought. I thought the fact that his name is Christian is a nod to the original Wicker Man. The fact that he's in the bear suit is a nod to the Neil LaBute Wicker Man, and that's my Ari Aster conspiracy theory.
Oh, I don't hate it. That's pretty good.
I'm convinced in my mind.
Do you want to know, or is it like Transformers
Ari
movie
Aster,
where you'd rather just
if you hear this,
okay,
please let us know.
Okay, even if he's like, no, what the fuck are you talking about?
Like, that's insane. I just genuinely want to know: was the bear suit a nod to the Nick Cage Wicker Man, and the name Christian a nod to the original Robin Hardy Wicker Man?
I think there's much more than a non-zero chance that you're right. It would not surprise me if that's a deep cut. If that's a deep cut nod.
Yeah, I think there's a good shot at that being legitimate. Yeah. I mean, the Wicker Man parallels are clear as day. So
yeah.
Well, they actually asked, the studio said, "Hey, will you make a Wicker Man type movie?"
Yeah.
And he originally said no, but then combined it with his other movie that he had, and we got Midsummer.
What is it about Wicker Man that makes it stand out?
Oh my God, there's so much. I mean, formally, it stands out because it's a musical, comedy, horror, mystery. It's the genre. You don't know it's a horror movie until the last 10 minutes. So that's part of it. But to me, it was that it actually had something to say and did it profoundly. Coming from my background as like super evangelical, like when I saw that movie, it like hit a nerve. But when I saw it the first time, I was like, oh my God, because I knew immediately what Robin Hardy was trying to say is that like it doesn't matter what the power structure is or the dogma is, any belief system can be used for ill. Because I think the genesis for him is he was seeing people in the 70s go back to sort of like, oh, like, let's be pagan. And he was like, and they thought it was cool because it was more freeing.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, is it? What would it be like if they actually did what they did back then?
Right.
And so he used that to make a point about the abuse of power in general.
Ergo, the Midsummer correlations as well.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, why I rate Midsummer lower than a lot of people is because I'm like, okay, I already knew which person was going to die. Like, we know it's the Wicker Man.
Yes.
I do think he was bringing something else to it, but it doesn't have that shock factor for me.
Yeah.
That they're watching 1973 Wicker Man for the first time had.
Yeah. Dan, why Evil Dead?
I saw it at the right time in my life. I knew I wanted to. At the time, I wanted to make my own movies, and when I saw that, I was getting into horror because it's where I saw the most innovation. Low budget horror.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, these guys literally went out into the woods with a camera and a couple, actors and like made a movie. And I thought, if this counts, like I could do that. And so Evil Dead for me is more so inspiring. It's more about what that movie represented than what it actually is. When I watch The Evil Dead, I think about like, oh man, making movies is fun. And you know what I mean? So that is it the best horror movie? No, there are plenty of horror movies I love more than that, but that one's important to me. It's special to me for a lot of those reasons.
I feel like it's like kind of like watching Mean Streets.
Yeah.
Like in terms of Scorsese's filmography, where it's like there's a lot that's technically wrong, but there's such passion and energy and innovation there that like it's infectious.
Like Sleepy Hollow.
Sleepy Hollow is actually like the absolute opposite.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I think that's why I can enjoy some really bad movies if I feel like the filmmaker behind it was like, this is gonna be fucking awesome, and like it's not, but like he was having a good time making it, and sometimes it translates to the screen, and if that's what happens, then I can get down with it.
I feel like that's why it's fun to watch The Room, even though
yes, 100%.
Terrible.
100%. It's why I watch Ed Wood movies for real. Like exactly. I watch his real movies. I do not think he's the worst filmmaker ever. Yeah. He was really bad at it, but he had a love for it that you can see if you're paying attention.
Yeah.
And so it's
Vampire is like a whole vibe.
Yeah. So Evil Dead just, man, I love that movie. I love it more than the second one. I know most people like Evil Dead 2 more. Yeah, and Raimi really did refine his craft by then. And it is probably the better movie. But
Raimi's 2 movies tend to be really good, like Spider-Man 2, which is the best comic movie ever made. All right, we're going to wrap it up before we go. Becky, you teased that you might have a YouTube channel coming up in the future, so keep us posted. Is there anything happening with you now that you want people to know about aside from that?
No, just check out my Twitter. I'm not calling it X. At BeckyJane02. I'm Beckeru Bonsai. Beckeru Bonsai. because I enjoy the film Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh, that makes sense. I never really thought to ask, but like I think I just subconsciously figured that's what that was all about. And also because it's a fun play on your name.
It's based off our name.
Dan, what about you?
So I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Dan Colón, Letterboxd at Dan Colón. That's it for my personal stuff. You can follow the other show. You can follow the show that I do, The Monsters That Made Us. We're on Twitter at Monster Made Pod. We're on Instagram at The Monsters That Made Us. We're also on YouTube, but there's no visual component. We're just adding our episodes on YouTube for anybody who cares to ingest their podcasts that way.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find us, The Monsters That Made Us. I have another podcast that I do about once a month. It's called The Podcast Around the Corner. My co-host Shawnee and I are working through the filmography of Nora Ephron, and we have released our Michael episode most recently, and our You've Got Mail episode is forthcoming. So look out for that
movie. Very cool.
Michael, like the sexy John Travolta angel, Michael.
Yes.
I completely forgot that movie existed.
And
as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh, there it is. Yeah.
Let me just say, I watched it for the first time for that podcast, and I had a lot more fun watching it than I thought I would.
Oh yeah, I can imagine that.
The romantic subplot is a little bit lackluster, which is a little bit disappointing.
Andy McDowell, is that who it is?
Yeah. Andy McDowell and William Hurt.
Yep. Okay.
That's Margaret Qualley's mom for all you Zoomers out there.
Now, yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure is. You can find us on Twitter at 1999 the podcast. You can find us on Instagram at 1999 the podcast. You can email us at 1999 at cageclub.me. We will be back in 2 weeks, and Christmas is coming, so I'll just say that. You will be visited by 3 podcast hosts. Until next time, Dan, thank you very much. Becky, thanks for filling in. Great job, both of you. Lovely talking to the both of you. And look out for frogs.